I found out my paycheck was frozen while a cashier stared at me, and a line of strangers built up behind my card. I swiped my card once, and it declined. I swiped it again, already embarrassed, and felt my stomach drop when I pulled up my banking app. My direct deposit had landed that morning. I could see every dollar sitting right there on the screen, but all of it was locked behind a message that read, "Account temporarily restricted for review." I stood in that checkout line with a full cart, my phone in my hand, and the slow, sick understanding that my bank had just turned payday into the worst moment of my week. The cashier gave me a polite smile that made it worse. I quietly told her I would have to put everything back. I walked out of that store with nothing, got into my car, and sat in the parking lot staring at my screen. The money was right there. I had earned it, and I could not touch a single cent. That account was not holding extra cash or a vacation fund. It held everything I needed to survive the next 2 weeks. Rent was due in 3 days. My electric bill was set to auto-pay the next morning. I had gas to buy, groceries I had just failed to purchase, and 2 more automatic payments lined up to pull from that same account. A freeze did not just block spending. It put every one of those obligations on a short, terrifying countdown. I did the math in my head, and every number made it worse. I had no backup account with a cushion sitting in it. I had no family nearby who could float me a few $100s without questions. This paycheck was the plan. The bank had not just paused a transaction. They had pulled the floor out from under my entire week, without a warning, without a phone call, and without any explanation beyond a forward message on a tiny screen. I sat in my car and tried to figure out what to say to my landlord. I called customer service from the parking lot because I still believed a real person could fix this in 5 minutes. I was wrong. I got transferred twice before reaching someone who sounded calm in the way people sound calm when they are reading from script. She told me my account had been flagged for unusual activity. I asked what activity. She could not share specific details. I asked whether she could see my direct deposit on her screen. She said yes. I asked why I could not access money I had legally earned. She said the review process could take up to 10 business days. 10. I asked her to repeat it. She did, with the same flat tone, as if she were describing a shipping delay instead of telling me I might not make rent. I asked for a supervisor. I was placed on hold for 11 minutes. The supervisor said the exact same thing. 10 business days. Nothing they could do. I hung up and sat very still in the parking lot. I drove to the branch because I still believed a face-to-face conversation would be different. The branch manager came out to meet me. He had the kind of expression banks seem to train their managers to use. Just enough concern to seem genuine, not enough to mean anything. He sat with me at a small desk, typed into his computer, and nodded slowly. He confirmed my account was restricted. He confirmed my deposit had arrived. He confirmed he could see everything I was describing. Then he gave me the same answer I had already heard twice. The review team handled these cases. The branch could not override their decisions. He suggested I wait and contact customer service with any further questions. I was sitting inside the same building that was holding my money, talking to someone who worked for the company that had frozen it, and he was pointing me back to the phone number I had already called. I thanked him, stood up, and walked to my car without another word. The consequences did not wait for me to make a plan. They started arriving that same evening. I got a notification that one automatic payment had failed. Then another, 30 minutes later. My landlord sent a reminder text about rent. I checked my gas gauge, and it was nearly empty. I looked at my kitchen and thought about the groceries I had put back at the store that afternoon. Everything was coming apart at the same time, all of it connected to one frozen account and a bank that had decided my paycheck was suspicious. That was the moment when helpless panic started hardening into something different. I had not done anything wrong. My money had arrived exactly where it was supposed to, and an automated system had locked me out of it without explanation. The fear was still there, but underneath it, anger was building fast. I was not going to wait quietly while my week collapsed around an error I had not made. I opened my laptop. I called again the next morning and got someone different, more talkative, maybe newer, maybe just less careful with what he said. When I pressed him on what had triggered the flag, he said something that stopped me cold. The way he described it, the freeze did not sound like it had anything to do with fraud. It did not sound like a suspicious transaction or a stolen credential. It sounded like an internal system error tied to the direct deposit itself. Some automated trigger their own platform had created, not something I had done. A mistake entirely inside their own system. And I was the one in an empty kitchen with a failed payment notification on my phone, rationing what I had left while they took their time. Every scripted apology I had received over the past 2 days suddenly sounded insulting. I thanked him, ended the call, and made a decision. I was done asking nicely. It was time to change the cost of ignoring me. I opened a notebook and wrote down everything. Every name I had been given. Every department I had been transferred to. Every timestamp I could verify from my call log. Every exact phrase a representative had used. I cross-checked the details against my phone records. I pulled up my banking app and took screenshots of the frozen balance, the restriction notice, and the confirmed deposit. I screenshotted the failed payment notifications. I went into my email and saved every message connected to the account. I organized it all into one clearly labeled folder on my laptop with dates and the file names. I was not doing this out of anger alone. I was doing it because I understood something important. If they planned to hide behind policy, I needed a record clean enough that no one could look at it and find a single gap. By the time I finished, I could tell this story from beginning to end without leaving anything open for doubt. The more I thought about the 10 business day timeline, the more clearly I understood what it was actually designed to do. It was not just a processing window. It was a pressure tool. Most people hit by an unexpected account freeze do not have 2 weeks of breathing room. They have rent due, bills, auto drafting, and groceries to buy. The system counted on customers being too stressed to fight and too relieved once the money came back to ask why it took so long. Nobody would escalate. They would absorb the damage quietly and move on. I had almost done exactly that. I had spent 2 full days calling politely, visiting in person, and asking nicely for something that was mine. The bank was counting on me staying in that loop until the 10 days ran out. I decided that was not how this was going to end. I needed to make ignoring me more expensive than fixing my account. And I needed to do it that day. That night, I researched bank oversight the way I should have 2 days earlier. I found the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, and my state banking commissioner's office. What I quickly understood was that these were not just complaint boxes where letters got filed away. They were regulatory bodies that banks were required to respond to. A detailed complaint with dates, screenshots, and a clear account of what had happened, especially one suggesting the freeze was caused by an internal error, was not something a bank could quietly ignore without creating a much bigger problem. Filing with one agency was manageable. Filing with 3 simultaneously, with matching documentation, created a paper trail that moved beyond the bank's own walls entirely. I spent the rest of that night writing the clearest, most factual account of everything that had happened, then read it back twice to confirm there was not a single sentence I could not prove. The next morning, I submitted complaints to all 3 agencies in one sitting. I included the date my deposit arrived, the dates and times of every customer service call, and my branch visit. I included the repeated claim from multiple employees that nothing could be done and that I should expect to wait up to 10 business days. I attached screenshots of the frozen balance and the failed payment notifications. I stated clearly that the restriction appeared to be linked to an internal system error and that the funds being held were payroll money needed for basic living expenses, including rent due, in 3 days. I kept the language calm and factual throughout. Then I submitted all 3 filings. The bank had wanted me to sit quietly for 10 business days. Instead, I had sent detailed, documented complaints to every relevant regulatory body, all before noon. The paperwork stage was complete. Now it was time for the second part of my plan. For a few hours, I debated whether to stop at regulators. Going public felt like a different kind of move. Once something is online, it has a life of its own, and I knew the bank could try to paint me as emotional or reckless if I gave them a reason. But then I thought about the checkout line. I thought about the branch manager with his practiced expression that led nowhere. I thought about my landlord's unanswered text and the failed payment notifications still arriving. I thought about the employee who had basically confirmed this was their own mistake. I had been patient and documented for 2 full days. They had met every bit of that with scripted delays and polite dead ends. The hesitation faded fast. I understood that staying quiet was exactly what they were counting on. I opened a blank document, took a slow breath, and started writing a timeline that anyone could read and understand. I wrote out everything that had happened in plain, clear language. Not a rant, not a threat, a timeline. It started the day my deposit arrived and ended with the most recent call. I included the key facts, the deposit amount, the date it arrived, the restriction notice, the multiple contacts that produced no resolution, the failed payments, and a statement from a representative suggesting the issue was internal to the bank. I attached screenshots to every platform that allowed them. Then I posted everything to Google Reviews, Trustpilot, Yelp, and Reddit, targeting both the specific branch and the bank overall. I also posted to my social accounts with the branch tag directly. I used no emotional language. I did not call anyone names or make any threats. I simply presented what had happened in order, with evidence attached, and let people decide for themselves what it said about trusting this institution with their paychecks. Then I set my phone down, closed my laptop, and waited to see if anyone was paying attention. I was not expecting much, maybe a handful of sympathetic replies. Well, I got started within the first hour and did not stop. People were genuinely, personally angry. Some said they had experienced the same kind of freeze with the same bank. Others said this post had made up their mind about switching accounts. A few tagged friends who bank there too. Every share pushed the post to more people who had their own reasons to distrust automated holds and scripted customer service. The story spread because it was not unusual. Almost anyone who has lived paycheck to paycheck can feel what it means to see earned money trapped behind a system error while bills keep arriving. I was not one unusual story. I was the story a lot of people have been waiting for someone else to tell first. The comments kept building, and underneath the anger, I felt something I had not expected to feel at all. Real momentum. Once the first wave of reactions arrived, something shifted. Other customers started posting their own experiences in the comments and in separate reviews. People shared screenshots of their own frozen accounts. Others described their own endless phone transfers and branch visits that had gone nowhere. What had started as one person's timeline was beginning to look like documentation of a pattern. And a pattern is something completely different from a bad day. One upset customer can be dismissed as an outlier or written off as difficult. Multiple people describing the same experience across different dates and locations is something that shows up in search results and stays there permanently. The branch's review page was no longer just a local business listing. It was turning into a warning. Every comment, every new one-star post, and every shared story added another layer. The comments kept coming. The posts kept spreading. And somewhere inside that building, someone absolutely had to be noticing what was happening to their numbers by the hour. By the end of the first day, I checked the branch's review profile and the rating had shifted downward. Not a dramatic collapse yet, but visible enough to notice immediately. I checked again an hour later, and it had moved again. More one-star reviews were arriving steadily. More people were asking in the comments why a bank needed public pressure before releasing a legitimate paycheck to the person who had earned it. I kept every one of my own posts factual throughout all of it. I did not add anything I could not prove. I did not encourage anyone to pile on or say anything they could not back up. I simply watched as the math did its own quiet, relentless work. That branch had built its rating through years of ordinary daily business. It was now taking real and visible damage in real time because of a single decision about how to handle one frozen account. I thought about the branch manager's careful, practiced expression when he had told me nothing could be done. The one thing that kept me steady throughout the whole campaign was the quality of my documentation. Every screenshot was real. Every timestamp was accurate and verifiable. Every post stayed firmly within the facts I could prove. That mattered more than anything else because it removed the bank's easiest counterattack. If I had exaggerated or posted things I could not support, they could have pointed to that and shifted the story away from the freeze and toward me. Instead, everything I'd put online was clean and airtight. A direct deposit had arrived. A freeze had been applied. Phone calls had produced nothing useful. A branch visit had produced nothing useful. Payments had failed. Regulatory complaints had been filed with 3 separate agencies. All of it was documented, all of it was accurate, and all of it was sitting in public view where it could not be quietly dismissed or denied. I had not attacked anyone. I had not exaggerated anything. I had simply told the truth somewhere the bank could not control it. The second day was when the story really broke open. More people found the posts overnight and shared them that morning. The reviews kept accumulating. Local community groups picked up the thread. People who had never used that branch were reading about it and leaving comments. The branch's profile, which had once looked like an ordinary local business page with a decent rating, was starting to look like a red flag. The irony was sharp. The bank had frozen my account under the name of a review process. Now the public was reviewing them, and they were losing that process completely. I had not persuaded anyone of anything. The documented timeline had done all the work itself. Every hour that passed without the bank resolving my account was another hour the damage compounded further. I kept checking my phone, watching the numbers shift, and wondering how much longer they were going to hold out before someone finally made a real call. Somewhere during the second day, the regulatory acknowledgments started landing in my inbox. The CFPB sent a case confirmation with a reference number. The OCC sent a separate acknowledgment shortly after. My state banking commissioner's office sent one too. Each was a short formal message confirming my complaint had been received and that the institution would be required to respond within a set time frame. I took screenshots of all 3 confirmations and added them to my documentation folder immediately. The situation had now shifted completely. This was no longer just a reputation problem for a local branch. There was a paper trail moving through official regulatory channels attached to the bank's licensed identity, requiring a formal written response. Someone inside that institution was going to have to explain in writing how a confirmed payroll deposit ended up frozen due to what appeared to be an internal error, while the affected customer documented every single unanswered request. The public pressure and the regulatory pressure were now both running at full force simultaneously. I refreshed the branch profile during the second afternoon and sat with what I saw. The rating had fallen to a number that made the place look either broken or unsafe. It was the kind of number that appears on the first line when someone searches the branch. The kind that follows a business for months because old reviews do not disappear when new ones come in. That rating had been built over years of ordinary transactions. It was now collapsing in under 48 hours because of one decision about how to handle one frozen account. I was not the one who had made this expensive. They had made it expensive the moment they told me nothing could be done and sent me home to deal with rent on my own. I had simply made sure the cost was visible. Anyone searching that branch before opening an account would now see exactly what kind of response they could expect in a crisis. My phone rang during the second afternoon with the bank's name on the screen. Not a general customer service number. A direct line. The person who called was entirely different from anyone I had spoken to before. No script, no smooth holding language, no vague, careful phrasing. She introduced herself by name and full title, said she was calling to personally address my account situation, and asked if I had a few minutes to speak. She had clearly reviewed the entire account history before dialing. Her tone was direct, serious, and completely prepared. She asked me to walk through the timeline one more time while she confirmed details on her end. I did calmly, exactly as I had written it down in my notebook. By the end of the call, she said she needed to make one internal call and would phone me back within the hour. I said that was fine, set my phone down on the table, and looked at the clock. 2 full days of silence had just ended. She called back in less than 45 minutes. The account restriction had been reviewed and lifted, she said. The funds were fully accessible. She confirmed the freeze had been triggered by an error within their own system, not by any suspicious activity on my part. She apologized for the length of time the issue had taken to resolve and for how it had been handled during my earlier contacts. I opened my banking app while she was still speaking. The balance was there. No restriction notice. No gray message. Just my money, available and unrestricted. I thanked her and ended the call. I set my phone on the table and looked at that screen for a long, quiet moment. Same account. Same funds. Same bank. The only thing that had changed was that 48 hours of public and regulatory pressure had turned a 10-business-day problem into a single afternoon resolution. The fix had been there all along. They had simply needed a reason to use it. Of course, I felt relief. The rent was safe. The bills could be paid. I could breathe again in the most basic practical sense. But relief was not the strongest feeling sitting in my chest when I put my phone down. What I felt most clearly was proof. Proof that they had been able to move faster from the very beginning. Proof that the 10-business-day timeline had never been a hard limit. It was a default they fell back on when moving faster cost more than making me wait. Proof that every claim of nothing we can do had never been the complete truth. The machine moved quickly the moment the calculation changed. When ignoring me started costing something real resolution appeared. I sat with that for a long time. It was not a comfortable thought, but it was an honest one, and I was not going to pretend it said anything other than exactly what it said. A little while after the funds were released, the same woman who had resolved the issue called again. The tone had softened even further. She said the bank valued my relationship and wanted to make sure the matter had been handled appropriately. Then she asked, carefully, whether I would consider updating or removing the public posts now that the situation had been resolved. I stayed quiet for a moment. I thought about the first representative and her flat, scripted voice telling me to allow 10 business days. I thought about the branch manager's practice concern that led nowhere. I thought about my landlord's unanswered text and the failed notifications piling up. The bank had found no urgency when the damage was mine to carry alone. It had found urgency the moment its ratings started bleeding. Now, with the bleeding stopped, it wanted to negotiate the record. I told her I would think about it. Then I started drafting my final update. I did update the posts. I added a clear note to every platform where I had written about the experience. I said the funds had been released, that the bank had confirmed the freeze was caused by an internal error on their end, and that the resolution had come only after regulatory complaints were filed and the situation had become fully public. I did not take anything down. I did not soften the original timeline. I did not remove any screenshots. I did not write a warm, forgiving conclusion that buried what had actually happened during those 2 days. People who had read the post from the beginning could now see the complete, unedited picture. What went wrong, how the bank responded to every quiet private request, and exactly what it finally took for them to act with urgency. That was the honest version of the update. The problem had been fixed, but the reason it was fixed and the dramatic difference in speed remained part of the permanent record. This was never about revenge for its own sake. I did not set out to destroy a rating or overwhelm a regulatory inbox. I set out to pay my rent on time with money I had already earned. When the normal channels failed at every single step, I used the tools available to any ordinary person, documentation, regulatory filings, and public transparency, to change the cost of being ignored. The bank froze my paycheck and treated my panic like a routine inconvenience. I gave them 48 hours. When they finally moved, they proved the one thing I had started to suspect from the very first call. Banks do not respond fastest when your life is at risk. They respond fastest when their reputation is. That gap between how slowly they moved when I was suffering quietly and how fast they moved when people were watching is the real lesson. Keep records. Know your regulators. Make your evidence public and factual. Your money is yours.